Welcome back. Let's go in depth now into Syria and Egypt and see what the media says. The Syria Times features a piece by Dr. Mohammed Abdu al-Ibrahim, which is in fact a reiteration of President Assad's vision on the current crisis. Any political solution without fighting terrorism has no value, the article titles. President Bashar al-Assad expressed in his yesterday's released interview with the Associated France Press the hope that the Geneva conference will be able to provide an answer about the date of eradicating terrorism in Syria, and asserted that once the countries backing terrorists stop doing so, and when this terrorism stops coming in, ending the war will not take more than a few months. The writer quotes President Assad saying any political solution that is reached without fighting terrorism has no value. There can be no political action when there is terrorism everywhere, not only in Syria but in neighboring countries as well. Even more, President Assad declared, "We cooperate with any party that wants to join the army in fighting terrorists." And this has happened before. There are many militants who have left the organizations and joined the Syrian army. President Assad added that the degree of savagery and inhumanity that the terrorists have reached reminds us of what happened in the Middle Ages in Europe over 500 years ago. In more recent modern times, it reminds us of the massacres perpetrated by the Ottomans, who killed 1.5 million Armenians and 500,000 Orthodox Syriacs in Syria and in Turkish territory. The Syrian president concludes the other aspect that is difficult to understand is the extent of Western officials' superficiality in their failure to understand what happened in this region and their subsequent inability to have a vision for the present or for the future. And also moving on now to Egypt, where Al Monitor features a piece titled "The Meanings of Egypt's Referendum." The writer Bassem Sabri starts by illustrating these facts. 2012 parliamentary election turnout reached the level of 54%, and in 2012 presidential elections, the turnout was at 46.4% in the first round and 52% in the second, while in the 2011 constitutional referendum, it had a turnaround of just over 41%, and most importantly, the 2014 referendum official voter turnout figures stood at 38.6%, which is higher than the 2012 referendum. Sabri explains there was also a tremendously omnipresent vote yes campaign, while no clear vote no campaign saw the light of day, whether out of lack of initiative or lack of allowed space, if not potentially a bit of both. The writer also looks at the phenomena in this year's referendum. First, a high turnout by female voters. Seemingly honest manifestations and festivities in the voting lines, often with nationalist and pro-army music playing in the background. And third, the absence of process derailing violence. And fourth, the low youth turnout. Sabri adds, but nonetheless, the final tally and result remains predominantly encouraging for the authorities in Cairo and strongly discouraging for the Muslim Brotherhood, who have already claimed the vote was rigged, especially as turnout and percentages were key in the battle surrounding legitimacy and popular support, both locally and internationally. Sabri says any political power hoping to rise and remain in power can no longer afford to resort to the Mubarak-era mass rigging ritual of the stuffing the ballot boxes, and the remarkable reality of the past 3 years in Egypt is that the successive landmark moments and Egypt votes have shown a high dynamic public substantially unpoliticized and willing to change opinion, and one that is also growing increasingly impatient with good reason. Sabri concludes his article saying that this new constitution is not perfect. Its evolutionary process was controversial, but it is more progressive than its predecessors and provides a good base to move forward upon in the coming period. And joining us today is journalist, writer and expert on Egypt, Abdulla Hamoudi. Mr. Hamoudi, let me start by asking you about this year's referendum in Egypt. One phenomenon we've seen is the high turnout of women. What do you think was the main driver behind that?
I think the main reason is the change of the nature of the role of women in Egypt. In the last few years, actually in the last 2 decades, men tended to travel and work in the Gulf and left women behind, and that was like a marked departure from the traditional secondary role of women in public life, and women have been responsible for the families, aspiring for better life and struggling to achieve stability and the continuity of their families. This has been reflected in public life in Egypt after the January 2011 revolution, and they felt so much endangered by the instability which took place during the Muslim Brotherhood rule over the year preceding the 30th of June 2013. This is why they voted in numbers, and they voted by their feet going and participating, and also in terms of promoting the aspiration of the new era in order to get Egypt back on its feet and have a fresh start towards rebuilding the country.
Mm-hmm. So you think while these women were in charge of their families in the absence of their husbands, which went to other countries to
well, that was the start of this new rule.
Right.
I mean, women have been historically the power behind the throne, behind their men, but now they felt the responsibility to get things done because they have been in the forefront of maintaining the security and the stability of life and trying to secure a bright future for their own children, who under Mubarak spent the best years, about 10 or 15 years of their lives after leaving university without an opportunity for work.
Mm-hmm. Yet on the other hand, you mentioned, Mr. Abdullah, that they feared that they needed to do something under the Muslim Brotherhood rule. So in that sense, what do you have to say about that?
Well, under the Muslim Brotherhood, regardless of the fact that they put forward some women facing the faces of women in prominent places, generally speaking, the women were marginalized under the Muslim Brotherhood, and they were not given a pivotal role or a credible role to contribute to public life. Now, this 50% of the Egyptian society wanted to assert themselves and take a charge and join the numbers which said no to them and said no to Mubarak before.
Mm-hmm. So let me move on to the next question. Do you think there will be transparent trials of ex-President Mohammed Morsi and other Muslim Brotherhood figures, of course? And what about the fate of President Hosni Mubarak?
Well, Hosni Mubarak is still detained because he has been acquitted on some counts, but other counts have not been decided upon in the courts as yet. With regard to the Muslim Brotherhood, yes, actually the judiciary in Egypt have a problem because political problems are not specified in the penal code. So many of the wrongs committed during the Mubarak and during the Muslim Brotherhood are difficult to quantify in legal terms in a way which could stand in court. Mubarak, for example, was responsible for the impoverishment of public life in Egypt over 30 years, and the ignorance of ignoring the services, especially in health and education. The Muslim Brotherhood are responsible for inciting violence, practicing violence, and trying to undermine the very foundations of the Egyptian state. So the nature of the charges are different, but still the judiciary find it difficult to lay charges against them which could stand in court. I don't know yet, but obviously, yes, everything is a matter of public debate now. And as you raised the question question, the Egyptians themselves discuss the questions, and they would like justice to be done. How this I cannot answer because of the fluid political situation in life, in the Egyptian life right now.
Yes, and speaking about the Muslim Brotherhood, and obviously under President Morsi, you mentioned that they were undermining the essentials of the Egyptian state, the foundations. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, well, the first thing is that there were three aspects of that. One of them is constitutional. President Morsi took oath, the constitutional oath of office to become a president.
Right.
But he was not actually ruling. There were so many questions about decrees and decisions which were sent to him from the leadership of the Brotherhood, either from the Guide General or from the Guidance Council, only for him to sign and read.
Yes.
And these people were not in office. They did not take the oath for office, and they were not chosen by the Egyptian people to run the country.
Yes.
In addition to that, they worked hard to create a parallel state rather than use the state machinery.
Yes.
For example, many of their foreign communications, foreign missions, visits, etc., bypass the Egyptian embassies and bypass the Egyptian foreign ministry. Inside the country, they tried to weaken the security police in order to try and promote their own militias and assign to them the role of police within the country. I mean, there are so many things like that. They excluded, for example, even the other Islamist parties, the Salafis,
Right.
and did not co-opt anyone who is not a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, creating a great deal of disaffection and alienation to many people in the Egyptian society.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdulla Hamoudi. Very interesting participation there. Thanks again.
Not at all, not at all.
That was political expert and journalist and writer, expert on Egypt, based in London, Abdulla Hamoudi.